Okay, in this webinar, we are going to talk through how to write a bill and how a bill becomes a law for the purposes of the Junior Youth Assembly Conference sponsored by the State YMCA of Georgia's Georgia Center for Civic Engagement. We always start by saying that at Junior Youth Assembly, we try to be as accurate as possible to the legislative process, but due to the fact that the Legislative General Assembly for the state of Georgia is 40 days, which can take several months, at Junior Youth Assembly, we have 3 days, which are back to back to back, in order to go through the legislative process. So due to some of those time constraints, some of the steps of the legislative process are either condensed or omitted. So the first part of the process is, what is a bill? And so you'll see listed on the PowerPoint slide that for the purposes of GPS and Common Core standards for the state of Georgia, we list the standard for the teaching of that process in middle school. So in the state of Georgia, a bill is a proposed law under consideration by a legislature. A bill does not become a law until it is passed by the legislature and in most cases approved by the executive. Once a bill has been enacted into law, it's called an act or a statute. So what we're going to focus on is how to craft one of these laws or bills. When preparing a bill for Junior Youth Assembly, we will give a supplemental guide to each student as to help prepare you guys and teach you the rules of how to write the bill. We ask that there not be more than one author per bill, and the bill author would be assigned to the committee from which they would present their bill. So let's say that your group has 10 students coming to the conference. What we would probably do in the end is that since it's a competitive process and we only choose a certain number of bills, if you are a person that your bill is selected for the bill book and for debate, and let's say that you're assigned to the House chamber and there's someone else from your school who maybe their bill did not get chosen, or maybe their bill did get chosen, but they're assigned to the Senate chamber, then you might go ahead and get with that person prior to attending the event and talk through what your bill is with them and make sure that they're prepared to help you and present your bill for you in the opposite chamber for debate. We also ask, and I'll show you the Google Doc later that shows some of the limitations, that when typing to submit a bill that you limit that to be not more than one page. And then we also ask that it be submitted online by the registration deadline or the deadline as determined by the teacher or the sponsor that's bringing your group. So step number 1 and step number 2, the first step is to come up with an idea that may be a new law where there's not one on the books. Maybe you have a great idea that no one's ever thought of, or it may be that you know of a current law that needs to be changed or edited, and so you would write a revision to a current law. The second step in the process would be to think through some of the ideas, check with the teachers at your school, maybe your principal, maybe your parents, grandparents, guardians, if you know local attorneys or local business owners, maybe even your local legislator. You would touch base with them, check with them, and see if they think that your idea is good or if they can help you think through and cultivate the idea. So what we're going to do as an example to teach the process of how to go about crafting a bill for Junior Youth Assembly is we'll look at 3 sample ideas, and then we'll take those 3 ideas and we'll weigh the ideas and see which one is the best one to craft a sample bill for. So the first idea that we have is to bring more money into the Georgia economy by printing more money from the Federal Reserve Bank in Atlanta. The second idea is to eliminate school buses and state-funded transportation to schools. And the third idea is to require all new state roadway signs to have posted speed limit for the specified road. So let's take a look at those 3 ideas and kind of talk through them and see which ones or which one might be the best out of those 3. So the first idea that we had typed down was to bring more money into the Georgia economy by printing more money. We're going to eliminate that one right off the bat because we should know that the U.S. Constitution always trumps the state constitution, and Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution denies states from coining or printing their own money. Only the federal government has the authority to authorize the printing of money. The second idea that we had was to eliminate school buses and state-funded transportation to schools. That's probably one that you would look at either rewriting the idea behind it and rewording that a different way, or for this purpose, we're just going to go ahead and eliminate that because we may have a hard time getting enough votes in order to pass this. So, and then it also pits the state of Georgia against local school systems and local counties, which is never a good thing. And so the third idea that we had was to require all new state roadway signs that are posted to have the posted speed limit for that specified area or stretch of road on every single sign on the roadway. So let's take that idea as our sample idea for our bill, and let's craft a bill around that. So after you have your idea for the bill, the next step that you have is to begin the research process behind that. In that step, you would begin to look at any agencies throughout the state of Georgia or groups of people that your idea for a bill may affect. And then you would do some digging and find some research, gather statistics, and different information to help support your bill and to garner delegates at the conference to want to support your bill and vote in favor of that. So some of the key things to keep in mind is, again, to think about the people or organizations that may be affected by your law. Think through if your bill or the concept of your idea has a price tag associated with that, and how are we going to pay for that bill, as well as the timetable of which to enact the bill into law, or let's say that a bill is signed into law by the governor, how quickly after it's signed into law should it become effective. And think through that stuff as you prepare to craft and hopefully have all of the information together to present your bill at the event. So the document that you're looking at right here is kind of a mock-up of a breakdown of how to prepare a bill with some arrows and instructions pointing to different parts on how to craft the bill. So what we're looking at is the sample breakdown. And what we're going to do in the subsequent slides and in the following slides is break this down piece by piece to give an explanation of what you need to be prepared for when crafting your bill and submitting your bill online, and some of the steps throughout this process. So we're going to take the very top page of that sample bill. The first thing that you'll notice at the top of the page is where it says JYA bill number. You'll leave that part blank because after the bill is submitted, if it's selected for the bill book, the state YMCA staff will auto-generate the bill numbers as we assign them to either the House or the Senate chambers. The second part of the bill, which is arguably one of the most important parts of the bill, is what we call the purpose. Sometimes you might hear people call it the subject, but for the purposes of a bill, we actually call it the purpose. This is where you would briefly list the idea that you have for crafting the bill. You want to make sure that you get the point across of what your idea is without too many specifics in that purpose, as once you go to the website and you type your bill and you submit that, and once it's printed, if it's chosen for the book and it's brought up at the conference for debate, the purpose is the only part of the bill that cannot be amended, changed, edited at a later date. So you're going to want to make sure that when you type that you're very careful and that you are not so specific in the fact that you box yourself in. So let's say that since we're talking about our sample idea behind our bill is to require that new traffic signs that are posted in the state of Georgia post the speed limit, that for us is a good idea because it's pretty generic. But if we were to write that and say to require that all new traffic signs in the state of Georgia to post that the speed limit is 55 miles an hour, then we're already kind of boxing ourselves in because we're listing a very specific purpose, and if we can't garner enough support for people to vote in favor of that, then we're kind of in trouble right off the bat. So you want to get your point across, but you want to be as general as possible. So you'll see there, and I've kind of touched base on that the purpose behind our sample bill is to require that all new traffic signs in the state of Georgia to post the speed limit. And what we'll do in the following slides is I'll show you in what we call the sections of the bill how to add more specifics in there later. So the next part that you will see on the sample bill sheet is introduced by, and that simply means the person who wrote the bill who is going to stand up and present that. And then you see name of bill author, name of delegation or school, and school town. When you go to the Google Doc to submit your bill, you'll type in your name as the bill author or the bill sponsor, and then you'll type the name of your school. We at the state YMCA will put in your school's town name there. The next part of that is a section that is already put into the bill on the end of the state YMCA of Georgia. That's not something that you will type in when you submit your bill. That's just some legislative words that are always used in the crafting of a bill. And so what that would read is, be it enacted by the General Assembly, Junior Youth Assembly of the state of Georgia, and it is hereby enacted by the authority of the same. Again, that's just the words that are used sometimes when crafting a bill or legislation. That is not something that you will type as you put in your bill. That's something that we will take care of when we are putting the bill book together. And now the next part is when we get into the sections of the bill. So the purpose was our idea. The sections are where we begin to put the detail, because the sections can be amended or edited later. So let's say that you submit your bill and it gets chosen for the bill book, and you think maybe a week after you find out that it's been chosen that you really don't like how you worded something, let's say in section 2. Well, as you will learn later in some of the preparation workshops for Junior Youth Assembly, and particularly once you arrive for a training session, in the legislative process, we have something called amendments. And that just means a change to a bill. And so we have amendment forms, and we would walk you through the process of, if you decide that you want to change something later, that you can fill out one of those amendment forms and make that change. So what we're going to do is look at how we break the bill into sections, which are the supporting areas for the idea behind your bill. When submitting your bill, section 1 is always going to be the part of the bill where you define certain topics. And you'll see in the next slide how we'll go into detail about what section 1 looks like when you define certain things. And then sections 2 through whatever number that is there are where you would put information. That could be information that supports the idea behind your bill. If there are penalties associated with a bill, so let's say that you were going to write a bill on stricter gun control laws, and that the current term for a violator of that law is 2 to 5 years, and you want to change it so that the law is 5 to 10 years. In those section 2 and 3, or even some of those latter sections, is where you would put some of that information. This is the part in the webinar where I need to point out that when you go to submit your bill on the Google Doc through the website, you will notice that it only gives you the option to have 9 sections. So you need to keep that in mind, that you don't need to type too much information there, because again, it will not fit on one page. But that you are also limited to 9 sections. Every single bill should have a minimum of 4 sections. The first section should always be defining terms related to your bill, and then there should be at least 1 section that has information that supports the idea behind your bill. And then the final 2 sections, which you'll see in the next slides, are always the same. So you have 9 sections, so you need to make sure that you're prepared in spreading the information for your bill in between those 9 sections. So let's look at section 1. So like I said, the first section is where you always define certain things. And since the idea behind our bill is that all new traffic signs that are posted in the state of Georgia will have the speed limit signs on them. So since we're discussing traffic signs, then we'll define what traffic signs are. And you can see here that we define that traffic signs shall be defined for the purposes of this act as any road sign or signpost placed at the side of or above roads to give instructions or provide information to road users. Also, our purposes dealing with traffic signs and speed limits, we probably also need to define what speed limits are. So speed limits shall be defined for the purposes of this act as the maximum or minimum in some cases speed at which road vehicles may legally travel on particular stretches of road. So what we've done in Section 1 is just define traffic signs and speed limit. Now, if you wanted to go further, you could probably define what is a roadway, what is a road vehicle. So there are different things that you can go into and define all of those, or you can define just a couple of them as we are in this example. Section 2, you'll see that I had mentioned that in the sections following Section 1 is where you want to give some information to support the idea behind your bill, where you list some of the statistics or facts that you may have found in the research in preparing for your bill. So since we're talking about posting new road signs on roadways that have speed limits, one of the questions that someone may ask us is, well, what agencies or what group of people will this bill affect? Or how are you going to implement this, and how are you going to pay for it? So what we do in Section 2 is to try to define that. So the State Department of Transportation will begin a new study under the Division of Projects to research the implementation of the new law to post speed limits on all new traffic signs. This study will be completed with a finalized plan by the start of the fiscal year 2015. So there we're just putting a little bit of information. And again, if it's something where when you type the bill, it seems like a good idea and you submit it, but later on maybe you want to change that from 2015 to 2016, then you could go through the process of amending that once you're at the event. The next part is Section 3. Again, there is where we're just putting more information to support the idea behind our proposal. And I had mentioned that you may also always want to be prepared to explain if your bill is something that's going to cost money to the state budget, how you're going to come up with the resources to pay for the new bill. So what we've listed here on Section 3, the funds needed to implement this new plan will come from two sources. Number one, $1 from every fine collected from the super speeder law will be set aside to pay for the placement of new traffic signs and the replacement of old traffic signs on roadways. And the second part of that is that the Georgia Department of Transportation budget line item regarding admin of highway planning and construction would be increased by $25,000 for every year for the next 5 years. Section 4, again, is just reinforcing the idea behind the construction of the bill and gives a timetable of when it has to be achieved by. The latter two sections of every bill are always when we do what we call the wrapping up of the bill. That's when you give any specific dates for the bill and when it may become effective. In the actual General Assembly, when bills pass, they are then called acts, and they always take place the following July 1st, unless noted otherwise. So you'll see there that on the bottom of this slide it says Section 5, because we're going to say for our sample bill that we want it to take place on a certain date. This act shall take effect on August 1st, 2015, and upon the signature of the youth governor. And again, the very last section is always, as listed on the bottom of this slide, all laws and parts of laws in conflict with this act are hereby repealed. Once you're done with the section part of your bill, you're done as far as it pertains to submitting the bill for Junior Youth Assembly. All of the information that you see at the bottom of the sample document, which I'll show you in a second, is stuff that, again, would be fixed by the state YMCA staff once the bill is submitted. So to go through the process of how to submit your bill for Junior Youth Assembly, I'll read through the 7 steps here, and then I'll show you what that looks like when you actually go to submit that. The very first thing that you would do is go to georgiacivics.org, which is the website for us. And then you would hover with your mouse, not clicking, but just hovering with your mouse over where it reads Model State Legislature. And then you will see that it says Junior Youth Assembly. Hover over that, and then you'll see that it says JYA Bill Submission. You'll hover over that and click, and then it will take you to where you submit your bill. You fill out all of those sections as we've discussed and gone through with the webinar. And then once you hit submit, if you've done it correctly, you will see you'll see a message on your webpage that says, "Thank you for submitting your bill. Your submission was successful." And so now what I'll do is I'll show you what that looks like. So again, you'll go to georgiacivics.org, which is the website. You'll hover over programs. You'll hover over model state legislature. Then you'll see Junior Youth Assembly, which is the conference that we're preparing for, and you would click JYA bill submission. Then it pulls up the Google Doc that we discussed. As earlier mentioned, you'll type your name, your school, the purpose again, which is the part that cannot be changed after you submit your bill. Section 1, and you'll see the note here that says that this is where you would enter any definitions. So in our example, we defined what traffic signs were and what speed limits were. And then you'll see between section 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 is where you would put the information that supports the idea behind your bill. And section 8 and 9 would be those last two sections in the example given. And then once you're done putting all of the information in, you would click submit. The document that you are looking at right here is one that will be provided to your teacher or the chaperone or sponsor that would be preparing your group for Junior Youth Assembly. And this is something that they can print out and that we'll make sure that you have a copy of as you prepare to write your bill. And you'll see at the very bottom of this page is the information, again, that walks you through the process of how to submit the bill for Junior Youth Assembly. So at this point is where we will stop the webinar. If you have any questions, make sure to ask either the teacher or the chaperone that's sponsoring your group and preparing your group for Junior Youth Assembly, or if you have a State YMCA of Georgia or Center for Civic Engagement staff member with you, at this point in time is when you might ask them some questions if you have any. So good luck in submitting your bill, and we will see you at Junior Youth Assembly.